The rain had not stopped for 14 hours, and every delivery felt heavier than the last. Sarah Collins tightened the zipper of her faded red jacket as she stared at the small paper bag in her hands. It was the only meal she could afford that day, bought after working 12 exhausting hours across the streets of Seattle, Washington. Her stomach growled painfully, but just as she prepared to take her first bite, she noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a rain-soaked bench, trembling from hunger. What happened after she handed him her last meal would not only change her life forever, it would destroy the empire of the man who had made her life miserable. Before we continue, if you believe kindness always comes back in unexpected ways, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. Sarah Collins was only 32 years old, but life had already carved deep lines of exhaustion across her face. Since losing her husband Michael in a construction accident 4 years earlier, she had raised her 6-year-old daughter Grace completely alone. Every sunrise meant another battle with overdue rent, unpaid utility bills, and the constant fear that one unexpected expense would leave them homeless. She worked as a food delivery driver for a local company called SwiftDash, where her manager Victor Hayes ruled through fear and humiliation. Victor never cared that Sarah was a widowed mother. If she was even 2 minutes late because of traffic, he publicly insulted her. If customers complained about cold food caused by restaurant delays, he deducted money from her pay. Every employee feared him, but no one dared to challenge him because jobs were scarce. That rainy evening had been especially brutal. Sarah had skipped breakfast so Grace could have cereal before school. Lunch never happened because she couldn't afford it. After 12 deliveries in freezing weather, she finally used the last $12 in her wallet to buy a simple chicken rice bowl. She planned to eat it while waiting for another order before heading home. As she sat near a quiet bakery, she noticed an elderly man wearing an old gray coat soaked completely through. His hands shook violently as he stared at the food in silence. His name, though Sarah didn't know it yet, was Thomas Bennett. His white hair clung to his forehead from the rain, and beside him rested nothing more than a worn umbrella with a broken handle. Sarah looked down at her meal. Her stomach twisted painfully. She hadn't eaten all day. Then she looked back at the old man. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, she stood, walked over, and gently placed the warm meal into his hands. The elderly man looked up with tears already forming in his tired eyes. His lips trembled with gratitude that words could barely express. Sarah simply smiled, wished him well, and quietly walked away before he could say anything more. As she climbed back onto her scooter, hunger hit harder than before. Her vision blurred slightly, but she ignored it. She still had 3 more deliveries before midnight. Back at home, little Grace hugged her tightly the moment Sarah entered the apartment. Grace excitedly showed a drawing she had made of their tiny family standing beneath a rainbow. Sarah smiled even though she felt weak enough to collapse. She kissed her daughter goodnight and secretly drank only a glass of water before going to bed with an empty stomach. The next morning began worse than expected. Victor Hayes stormed into the delivery office shouting at everyone. Overnight, several expensive catering orders had been canceled after customers reported repeated complaints about employee mistreatment. Local social media pages had begun exposing SwiftDash's toxic work environment through anonymous stories written by former workers. Victor blamed every driver except himself. When Sarah arrived, soaked again from another morning delivery, Victor humiliated her in front of everyone, accusing her of being too slow and threatening to fire her before the weekend. She lowered her eyes and accepted the insults quietly. What neither of them knew was that someone very powerful had been watching. The elderly man Sarah had helped wasn't homeless at all. Thomas Bennett was the retired founder of Bennett Hospitality Group, one of the largest restaurant and hotel companies in the Pacific Northwest. After stepping away from business, Thomas had developed a quiet habit of walking city streets alone, believing that true character revealed itself when people thought no one important was watching. He often dressed simply to avoid recognition. The kindness Sarah showed him had stayed in his heart all night, but what disturbed him even more happened afterward. One of his assistants had quietly followed Sarah after she left the bench. They witnessed her skipping dinner entirely and later discovered how badly SwiftDash employees were treated under Victor Hayes. Thomas ordered a complete investigation. Within hours, investigators uncovered illegal wage deductions, unpaid overtime, manipulated delivery records, and dozens of violations affecting nearly every employee. Victor had hidden thousands of dollars by reducing workers' earnings while claiming company losses. The evidence was overwhelming. The following morning, government labor officials entered Swift-Dash headquarters. Employees watched in complete silence as investigators carried boxes of financial records from Victor's office. Victor's confident smile disappeared. His bank accounts were frozen. His contracts were suspended. His company license was placed under immediate review. By noon, investors withdrew their support, and major restaurant partners canceled agreements one after another. Everything Victor had built through greed collapsed within a single day. Meanwhile, Sarah continued making deliveries completely unaware of what had happened. Late that afternoon, she received an invitation to meet someone at the Grand Bennett Hotel downtown. Assuming it was another delivery, she nervously entered the elegant lobby wearing her worn delivery jacket. To her surprise, the elderly man from the rainy bench stood waiting beside the fireplace. Thomas smiled warmly. He thanked Sarah for reminding him that genuine kindness still existed. He explained everything. He told her he had learned about her sacrifices, her daughter, and the impossible conditions she endured simply to survive. Then he handed her a small envelope. Inside was a certified check large enough to erase every debt she carried. Sarah's hands began shaking. Before she could recover, Thomas made another offer. He invited her to become Community Outreach Director for Bennett Hospitality, leading programs that provided meals and employment opportunities for struggling single parents across Washington state. It was a full-time position with health care, retirement benefits, paid vacations, flexible hours, and a salary she had never imagined earning. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. For the first time since Michael had died, she felt hope replacing fear. Over the following months, her life transformed completely. Grace moved into a brighter apartment with a small bedroom she proudly decorated herself. Sarah no longer worried about choosing between groceries and electricity. More importantly, she dedicated every working day to helping people who had once stood exactly where she had stood, hungry, exhausted, and forgotten. She created meal assistance programs, emergency childcare partnerships, and employment opportunities for struggling parents. Hundreds of families found stability because one woman who once had nothing refused to ignore another person's pain. News of Sarah's story spread throughout Seattle. People admired her not because she became successful, but because success never changed her heart. Every Friday evening, Sarah quietly visited the same park bench where she had first met Thomas. She always carried 2 warm meals. Sometimes someone hungry appeared. Sometimes no one did. Either way, she never stopped believing someone might need kindness before the day was over. Thomas often joined her. Neither of them spoke much. They simply watched strangers passing by, knowing that one simple act of compassion could completely redirect another person's future. Years later, when Grace graduated from college, she told the audience something she would never forget. She said that her mother had taught her the richest people were never those who possessed the most money, but those who were willing to give even when they had almost nothing left. The entire auditorium stood in applause. Sarah looked toward the sky, quietly thanking Michael for giving her the strength to keep moving after life had broken her heart. She realized something beautiful. The meal she thought she had lost was actually the greatest investment she had ever made. Not because it brought wealth, not because it brought recognition, but because it proved that compassion can travel farther than any delivery driver ever could. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone you love, subscribe to the channel, and help us spread more stories that remind the world kindness still exists. Special request, before you leave, please comment. Kindness always finds its way back. We'd love to know where you're watching from and what part of Sarah's journey moved you the most. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with an empty stomach, a generous heart, and one simple decision to put someone else's need before your own. In the end, Sarah didn't lose her last meal. She planted the seed that changed countless lives forever.